Hour starts right now.
Chuck,
Good evening, Ari.
I got to ask you before I let you go, have you ever had a newsroom day like this?
I don't know anymore. I feel like they're every day. Did today's day end in a Y?
I feel it's different because we've been talking about the election meddling for well over a year. And now you have the case laid out, announced by a Trump DOJ official. I mean, it's something. It's really something. It
is something. No, there's no doubt about it. And to think that this is only a smaller slice of this probe.
Exactly. There's so much more there.
No WikiLeaks yet. We don't know anything about that yet. That's a separate part of the investigation.
Yeah, there's a lot of other potential criminal liability. And I think about Meet the Press this Sunday, where I'm sure you're going to be balancing this story as well as your special coverage on the school shooting. Chuck will be watching. And otherwise, I will say have a good weekend. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
We begin with breaking news. Bob Mueller issuing the first indictments of the Russians interfering in the 2016 election. We have them all. We'll be going through it. The other breaking news, right on in relation. Donald Trump responding tonight by admitting Russians meddled. That response from the president shows just how much Bob Mueller has ended any debate over the fact of Russian interference. How Bob Mueller's probe not only indicted people today, but how he indicted a conspiracy theory that this president has been peddling throughout his presidency. This is the first time the U.S. has indicted foreigners for a major election meddling plot. This is the first time a DOJ official has formally announced the charges. That's unlike, say, Mike Flynn or Paul Manafort in those cases where we only heard from Mueller's documents. They did the talking, not Trump appointees. Tonight's development so big, though, that you see it there. Donald Trump's own appointee to the Justice Department, Rod Rosenstein, addressing the nation after personally briefing the president. No worries here about overstating it. You can't overstate what is happening right now. And what you see on your screen there, you are looking at a Trump official announcing charges against Russians for helping the Trump campaign.
The indictment charges 13 Russian nationals and 3 Russian companies for committing federal crimes while seeking to interfere in the United States political system, including the 2016 presidential election.
We're in new territory right now. A lot of talk about what it all means. We're dividing our special edition of The Beat tonight into pieces to explore each part of this case. But right now, let's begin with the core of what Mueller alleges. First, that Russians waged a secret propaganda war online, operating social media to distort the election debate, posing as U.S. persons to trick voters and involve them in a conspiracy, committing identity fraud, stealing real Americans' identities. And then the second revelation in this new set of indictments here is that they weren't just working online. Russians abusing computer technology within the U.S., using it to buy political ads. And some of them came here, traveling to states like Nevada, Michigan, and Texas, corrupting grassroots politics by, Mueller says, staging these political rallies in America. They talked to people about focusing on so-called purple states to help Trump, like Colorado, Virginia, and Florida. Well, remember this from the campaign? Do you remember these costumes? Hillary Clinton and these dummies. There she was as a kind of a prisoner. That was at a real Republican event. Think of that context now for what's new tonight, the revelation that Russians paid someone to build a cage on a flatbed truck at a rally and then paid so they would wear a costume of Hillary Clinton in a prison uniform. And then, let me show you one of the most significant revelations of all. Bob Mueller stating that Russians were communicating with people associated with the Trump campaign. I repeat, from the new Mueller indictment, these Russians, now indicted, were communicating with people associated with the Trump campaign. To begin with our special coverage here on what's in the indictment, I turn to former Watergate Special Prosecutor Nick Ackerman and former White House Ethics Chief Richard Painter. Richard, I begin with Rod Rosenstein coming out for the first time ever, as I mentioned, to announce this. Your view of what he did, why that was important, and how that correlates with him briefing the president himself on a probe into how this work benefited the Trump campaign.
Well, this part of the case, this indictment, concerns the social media activities and other political activities by Russian agents, grassroots political activities inside the United States in order to swing the 2016 presidential election. This is separate from the computer hacking of the DNC computer and other aspects of the Russia investigation that we have yet to hear about. These people have been indicted. The president, for the first time today, has acknowledged that there was Russian interference in the election. The Russia investigation is not a hoax. Anybody who said it is a hoax is a fool and doesn't belong in our government, whether Democrat or Republican. We've known that for a long time, that there's been Russian interference in our election. The CIA and the FBI told us that over a year ago, and this indictment is the first step toward legal action being taken. But I have to say, this is in part our own fault. If Americans can be so easily duped into believing that Hillary Clinton ought to be in jail because some idiot dresses up in a jailbird costume looking like Hillary Clinton, when there's just zero evidence that Hillary Clinton did anything criminal, and people want to believe the lock-her-up chants at the National Republican Convention, which were chanted by Americans, you know, we're a sitting duck for the Russians. We're going to get taken over by the Russians.
I hear you, sir. I hear you. But I want to build on the point and bring in Nick. Nick, fraud is illegal because it can work and it's important. And this is a conspiracy now alleged to defraud the United States. Up until today, there was an intelligence discussion. There was a political discussion. There was a Donald Trump conspiracy theory. Now, tonight, February 16th, it changes. Those discussions end, and we are sitting on an international criminal conspiracy indictment for this fraud.
That's right. I mean, this is right out of a James Bond novel. They bring in a SWAT team of Russians into the United States.
Inside the United States.
Inside the United States. People posing as tourists coming into the United States who are basically, their one job and only job is to interfere with our election, try and throw the election to Donald Trump, and then to try and get Americans to basically divide against each other. I mean, what I found most amazing in this indictment was even after Donald Trump was elected and they basically reached the goal of their conspiracy, they were still funding and trying to incorporate rallies in favor and opposed to Trump.
False flag, fraud rallies, political interference. Richard, let me read to you what David Korn, who helped break the dossier story, who was then cited in the GOP memo, who's been a central investigative reporter on this, his view of this and all of this breaking tonight. People are digesting it. He says, Special Counsel Mueller has officially confirmed the Trump campaign was in contact with Russians while Moscow was assaulting the election. Richard, your view pinpointing that part of the indictment that I flagged that is so significant that directly states there was contact with Trump campaign associates.
Well, in this part of the indictment, those contacts concerning social media at this point apparently were with people who did not know they were dealing with Russian agents. But we got to understand that there are other people in the Trump campaign, including Donald Trump Jr. and Jared Kushner, who met with other Russian agents in the Trump Tower to get dirt on Hillary Clinton. So there was definitely willing collaboration with the Russians with respect to other parts of the Russian operation. This part of the Russian operation thus far, with respect to the social media, the contacts may very well have been unwitting contacts with the Trump campaign. People didn't know who they were communicating with. But bottom line is the Trump campaign wanted this to happen. This is details we've learned today, but it isn't really breaking news. We've known what's been going on here for well over a year. What is shocking is that it took the President of the United States until today to acknowledge that the Russians interfered with our election criminally.
Well, and I would put it differently. It is breaking news that the United States is indicting these Russians for meddling in our election. Not only is it breaking news, it's literally never happened before. I take your factual point, Richard, which is much of this was out in the open and it's known. But many crimes are out in the open. The question of justice is always a question of what will be done about the crimes. Stay with me.